Hello and welcome again to another episode of DaveTrippin Couch Therapy, where I discuss all things Japan, cultural, otherwise, teaching related, stuff like that. I'm going through my emails this week and making more videos than I usually would to try and get through them, to try and add a personal touch as opposed to getting hold of people via the internet. So here we are. The question today was, does Japan need more teachers? And I thought that this was a particularly interesting question to answer because as a teacher, you kind of lose perspective on that when you're already here. You don't think so much about how many more do they need, but it's a topic very near and dear to my heart. As discussed in the previous video that I made, I'm really interested as well in how Japan is changing in the coming years and how that affects the whole, call it like, career landscape that exists here. So anyways, let's read the email. Watched one of your videos, good stuff. Quick background, 46-year-old American with a BA in English literature, just needed to get out of college, I hear ya. 9 years ESL teaching experience in Mexico, that's interesting. Hoping you answer a few questions for me. I had wanted to teach English in Japan 25 years ago, but heard the market was saturated. Apparently that has changed. I enjoyed your video because you would appear to be in Japan for the long term. My plan is to move to Japan for the long haul. I was chatting with a boat builder in Delaware, interesting, a few years ago, and he said, Japanese kids have become like American kids, lazy. Do you find this to be true? Student ages, everything seems to be geared toward elementary age children. If I had my druthers, I'd prefer not to teach little kids. True or false? The majority of ESL work is at the elementary level. Any info or advice is appreciated. P.S. I'd like to live in a remote area. Is a complete lack of Japanese knowledge going to be a problem? Okay, let's go through this bit by bit, but I would say first off, let's answer the primary question of the video because that's the reason that it was made for. Does Japan need more teachers? In a word, yes. I relate this to the fact that there's going to be this big global spotlight arriving on Japan very, very soon in the form of the 2020 Olympics. And Japan, as a first world country, as one of the leading nations of the world with a modern economy, truly lags behind so many other countries. This is not hearsay that Japan lags behind in English competency with many other countries in the world. And we aren't kind of lucky, we are lucky as English speakers that we don't have this pressure on us, and it just so happens that English has become the sort of de facto language of international relations and often business, probably as a result of the US. I mean, some economics major can chime in down below the video to say why English has become so dominant in that way, but it's a fact, and Japan lags behind in this particular area. And so they are interested in ramping up their efforts. Not only that, I believe Abe, the current Japanese Prime Minister, maybe they're under the same system like Canada, they say Prime Minister, he made a big promise when he got into power that they would increase the effort to get more AT, more ALT, more native speakers of English into the classrooms to get up the percentage of people speaking English and the rate of competency at which, or level of competency at which people are able to speak English. And I made mention of it, I sort of sidetracked in the previous video, why it's so relevant at the 2020 Olympics, because each time an Olympics is held, there's a greater and greater attention and focus put on that event as our sort of technology evolves to cover the event. And it's no secret if you look that at that time 5G will have come out, 5G being the 5th generation of data transfer that's going to be available, and so every single detail you could possibly imagine, and in ways we haven't even normally covered the Olympics before, will happen. And so for a country that doesn't like to be embarrassed, this would be a horrible event if they weren't able to meet up to the promises that they were telling themselves and their people when that event arrives. So yeah, absolutely they need teachers, they need more of them, they need good teachers, they need them in a variety of different ways. If you go onto any of these recruitment websites, something like Ohio Sensei or Gaijin Pot, those are to name two. There is no shortage ever and always of the amount of positions that are being put there for teachers, whether that's for all different grades, for conversational schools, for businesses, for everything. So anything you can imagine under the sun in terms of somebody being a teacher in some capacity is up there, and there's lots of it. And it's interesting, that's a whole different discussion to have, which I find really interesting, is because I don't consider myself a shy person. I mean, it seems obviously counterintuitive for a person who puts videos of themselves on the internet. You couldn't be too shy, could you? But in some aspects of my life, I am. And speaking a foreign language is one that I find really, really trying, a really big test for me, because much like the Japanese, I don't know if embarrassment, it's not embarrassment so much as self-loathing at failure that has made it difficult for me to feel comfortable in conversational practice, which is really, if you want to cement anything that you're learning, what you need to do. And I think that that's where the Japanese struggle the most. To make an observation of why they may lag behind the world is in their learning of English is because they're such a modest people. The Japanese want to do it perfect or not at all. So if I were to make an observation of their culture, I think that that's what holds them back. Yes, you need to know what to say. So a lot of people get hung up on this, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And sometimes that gets drilled so long and for so often we forget that somebody can't even make a mistake if they don't have enough language to even fail. So you of course still need that base, and it's always a battle between this, get enough of a base language developed and then speak enough of it to progress. But that's where the Japanese do need to improve, because I think more and more now, when you speak to a Japanese person, you'd be surprised at their grammatical understanding of the language, but then also just as shocked at how little application they have because they haven't used it in a conversational setting. So you can definitely count on there being a need for more teachers. And now, let's continue along with the other questions because they're interesting. I like the kind of thing here. A lot of it to do, I think, with perception. And this is something, again, very near and dear to my heart. I was thinking of actually making a whole video dedicated to this, but it'll come out in this one, I guess. Friend in Delaware says that Japanese kids have become like American kids, lazy. Do you find this to be true? Absolutely not. I don't think kids are any more or less lazy or ever have been in history. What I think that happens, and I see this so much nowadays with the criticism of millennials, is this funny thing where I saw it here. I'll tell an anecdotal experience to explain this, where when I was in, I suppose you would call it crew, were you to be in the US, but in my case we call it rowing in Canada, when you were coming up through the ranks, it was always tradition, a horrible tradition, a heinous one, that the senior members of the crew or the higher levels would always shit on and treat poorly the lower levels, say the juniors versus the varsity. And then as soon as those juniors would become varsity, they would inflict the same sadness back down on the new juniors that entered the club. Not always, but to my mind, as I went through this process, I thought it was shocking the lack of self-reflection that people had to not realize that they were now doing the same thing that was inflicted on them. And I see the same thing when I look at every single generation coming up and up and up that will always lament the laziness of the generation below them and always think nostalgically on how great things were when they did it their way. And I see it so much now where it's become so amorphous with millennials, where it's not even an older generation that criticizes millennials. Anybody who's even remotely above, who might even almost be a millennial themselves, but it's uses their position to then criticize anyone below them, where we're just doing the same thing. History is so cyclical, and we do well to wake up to this fact that no, nobody is more or less. It's maybe the less juicy, less gossipy thing for us to hear, but people are people. They always have been. Yes, there's different cultural shifts and changes, but I don't think en masse that people have become lazier. I think given the proper influence, the proper upbringing, that people would be just as industrious, just as engaged, just as passionate. And this idea that the generation below us is always going to be lazy is fabricated because that's what we want to believe, essentially. It legitimizes our own experience to criticize the one that's below us. And kids innately, compared to people with more experience, usually are a bit lazier, or obviously lacking experience. They do dumber things, so it's easier to criticize them. But what I take issue with is that how can people so continuously fail to see that this is just the older generation doing it to the younger becomes the older, and then the older does it to the younger again and again and again, whether that's in a sports setting, whether that's in a generational setting, whatever it is, we're doing it again and again. And if we woke up to that fact, we would do a lot more for the generation coming up, and we wouldn't be so disconnected from them. Where I think when a lot of people say, oh, I just don't understand those people or those kids that age, it's because you've made no attempt to. You expect people from a different world to know how yours is when they have no experience in that. Where you with more experience should be able to look down and realize how change occurs and then have patience for that reason. So no, I know that was really long, but that's my thoughts there. No, I don't find Japanese kids particularly lazy. They're just as lazy as I ever was, or adults, or younger, or anything, and everything in between. Next one. Everything seems to be geared towards elementary age children. Well, I think if we threw some science at this, yeah, there's a big change in the way that, yes, they're gearing it more towards elementary school kids, where they didn't teach grades 1 to 4 English before. They've now started teaching them English. So that is a big change. However, due to the shrinking population size of Japan and there being less and less children, you'd kind of expect with the power of science that it's not always going to be that you have this bottom-heavy demographic of kids to teach. In fact, on the other end of things, you'd probably expect that you would have more junior high, high school, as you see a shift in the demographic ages of who exactly lives in the country. It may seem that way now because there is such an emphasis on English and they're trying to get more of it into the classroom sooner. But I don't think you really struggle at all if you want to find a junior high school or high school position. If you go in search of that, I think you would find that no problem, honestly. All right, last one. I'd like to live in a remote area. Is a complete lack of Japanese knowledge going to be a problem? Some days it'll be a problem. Some days it won't be a problem. If you don't have any Japanese whatsoever, it'll be difficult to begin with. But of course you learn, if you come to Japan and you're not going to try and learn any Japanese. I don't make a lot of videos where it's like, don't be this person and come here, or if you're this kind of person, don't come. But I'll say in this video, without making it a part of the title, if you are that kind of person, don't come. I'm not saying that you are that kind of person, but it'll be challenging to begin with. But the Japanese, I've been constantly blown away by their hospitality and their willingness usually to try and speak your language. And there's so much to communication that is Japanese, is English, is your character that you bring to a conversation. It's amazing how two people speaking a native language with each other would only argue all the time, but then two people who don't speak a word of each other's language could get along like old friends only for the character that they have. So overcome it with your moxie. So there you are. Those are my thoughts on, does Japan need more teachers? Absolutely. There's a reason for it. Do I think that the generation of Japanese kids coming up are any more or less lazy? No. Are they different? Yes, but in no way do I see them as particularly more or less lazy. If anything, they seem to be a lot more driven than I do, but that seems to be, or than I was, although that may be in a society instilled characteristic of the kids here. And then last, are you going to have trouble with the Japanese? Yes. Yes and no. Yes days, no days. But work through it and you'll be just fine. All right, there you go. There's another video, bonus video, middle of the week. It was a lot of fun making this. If you enjoyed the video, please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please do hit the bell so you get notifications. Please do enjoy the videos. just enjoy the videos. It shouldn't actually be a task to come here. Anyways, that was cool. Check out Patreon if you're looking to support the channel. I always appreciate that. I appreciate each and every person who comes to drop by. I'm sending out the winners giveaway prints as promised, so I hope that the winners of the giveaway enjoy that. Everyone is fantastic. Life is good. I will catch you in the next video, the one that I'm working on this week in Saturday. It's already looking good. If you follow me on Snapchat, I've been teasing that video a little bit. Follow me on all the social media down below. I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.